Okay, all right. Welcome back, everyone. Now, InfoSec will be sharing with you the security aspects related with the free and open source softwares. And later, Sanjay will be introducing to you the major events like Google Summer of Code and how to participate in those. Okay, one thing I have to mention before starting is that we may be using the term open source very frequently during this entire session for our convenience, but we will be actually meaning free and open source softwares. Okay, let me hand over the session to my friend Neeraj to give you the starting to the session. Over to you, Neeraj.
Thank you, Harshal. Am I audible?
Yes, Neeraj.
Yeah, thank you. So, so most of us grew up, if we were lucky enough to be around a computer, it was most probably Windows on it, or again, maybe a Mac. But this is what we knew as OSs, right? Windows and Mac. Both of them are proprietary software. So let's flash back a few years, go to 80s or something. Then we have something called Unix, which is actually the big daddy of all these OSs. Okay, and so Unix was also a proprietary software, but due to some funny legal hassle, the company, which was Bell Labs or AT&T, Alexander Graham Bell's company, was unable to enter the computer industry. So if anybody asked for the source code of Unix, they had to license it to them. So it's spread in the education circles and business and everything. But eventually, they found a way to fix that, and Unix became a proprietary software. So now you want the people who worked on Unix in the company wanted to have a free and open source alternative to Unix as such. So Harshad, if you could go to the next slide. Yeah. So here you can see. So this amazing guy called Richard Matthew Stallman, also known as RMS, started the freedom movement with regards to FOSS, and so basically uh, he wanted, and he started GNU or GNU, which basically stands for GNU, not Unix, because he wanted a free alternative to uh, Unix, right? And what do we mean by free? Okay, does it mean like free as in you don't have to pay any money for it? Not necessarily. Actually, it means free in the most sense of you can do anything with it. If you are a user, it doesn't matter how much you paid for it. If you can get that software, you're supposed to be able to use it any way you want it to be used. So that is the free part of the free and open source software. And so basically, he was unfortunately only able to get the. See, if you see the slide, there's a picture of a nut. Okay, so basically that there's a shell which is the outer part and the kernel which is the inner part, which is from where I guess the terminology in Linux came. So GNU part was the outer part. So Bash was the shell developed by the guys at GNU, and they were able to get all the application side ready, but they still didn't have the foundation for to build alternative to Unix. So that's where a student, a computer science, 21-year-old computer science student, Finnish student in US, like some of us here, came into the picture. His name was Linus Torvalds, and what he did was he was trying to put uh, an education-friendly alternative to Unix called Minix on his new PC. Okay, but so he thought there are some flaws, so let me try to fix that. And back in the day, right, the OS was not as complicated; it didn't have all these graphics and fewer lines of code. So it started with very few lines of code, and now you can see it just exploded. And now there are like 23.3 million lines of code or something in Linux, and you see Linux everywhere from the Android on your phone to the servers and everywhere. So, but what makes Linux different from, say, Microsoft? Even Microsoft has Microsoft Windows 10 and Windows Server editions and everything. But Linux, right? See, if you can go to a website called Linux from scratch, you can actually build Linux from scratch, from the source code. You can take the source code, you can compile it like you compile your C program, and then build it for the target system. And you can add module by module, just like a Lego brick, uh, and a project made from Lego bricks. You can just build it up from the ground up. So you have complete control. So how would it make it different? Like, see, if you have noticed the news recently, iOS 14 released, and there's a very big, huge new feature in iOS 14. So, what is that feature? Widgets. Widgets on your home screen. And we all know how long this feature has been available in Android, which is the open source alternative. So that is the power of open source. And Linux or GNU/Linux is what started it all. So over to Devang, where he'll. So wait. So again, one more thing before I go hand over to Devang. I told you about how Linus was also a student, right? Linus Torvalds. So and he was trying to work around with very few lines of code, which blew up into this huge project. Like that, today you go and start find your favorite GitHub repo, and with the help of instructions by San, given by Sanjay and all, you can just start and do a maybe a minor patch, but the project you're working on might be a dependency of a huge kick-ass project in the which is used everywhere, right? So you can be part of this WAS world too. So which are some of the examples of the open source software you already use daily? Devang will let you know.
Thank you, Neeraj, for that wonderful introduction. Am I audible?
Yes, sure.
Yes.
There are a lot of popular free and open source softwares that we use daily. Surprisingly, most of us are using them for years but are not aware. Some of our favorite ones are Mozilla Firefox, VLC Media Player, GIMP Editor, and VS Code. Next slide, please. Interestingly, FOSS has made its way into the field of information security. And presently, we have a plethora of top-notch tools and softwares that the leading security experts and researchers put their trust on, which don't cost even a rupee. Some of the popular ones are Kali Linux, a Debian-derived Linux distribution designed by offensive security for digital forensics and penetration testing. Wireshark, a network protocol analysis tool that most of us have used in networks course. Nmap, a network discovery and audit tool. Metasploit, a famous penetration testing framework. OWASP Zap, web app scanner similar to Burp Suite. Snort, a free and lightweight network intrusion detection system. ClamAV, an open source antivirus engine. Now Neeraj will give you an idea of how FOSS changed people's mindset. Over to you, Neeraj.
Thank you, Devang. So what's the difference between, say, proprietary software and FOSS when it comes to the most fundamental level? Basically, put into simple words, you can see under the hood. To give you an analogy, imagine you could open up your CPU cabinet. Okay, I'm just gonna assume that you're having a desktop right now. So if you could unscrew the and slide open the side, you can see the motherboard. And if you just shine a torch onto it, and then you can see a shiny little circle somewhere around the bottom corner, which is actually a button cell. So you might ask the question, like, it's already powered by some AC plug, so why the button battery? So somebody might answer, like, it's to maintain the time. Then you might go, like, is it just the time, just to maintain the time? And not exactly. It even maintains some customization in your BIOS, like your password for BIOS. Okay, so all of us, most of us, I hope, have a password protected user account on your Windows, right? But the thing is, in most of our desktops, right, the hard disks are not encrypted. So anybody could plug in a small pen drive with Linux on it and boot their Linux and see all your files. So how do you prevent it from booting? You put a password on your BIOS. But that can be undone by just by pulling out the battery and putting it back in. You're going to reset the BIOS password, right? So what I want to say is, just by being able to open and see into the cabinet and asking the right questions, somebody could find such a simple vulnerability in the hardware infra. So basically, you could maybe put a lock on your cabinet. So similarly, in Linux or any of the open source software you have compared to something like, say, proprietary, say Microsoft Windows, you can actually see how whenever you do something, how it's actually happening under the hood. So then you might start to answer, can it be done differently? So then you start to explore, you become a tinkerer, and maybe you come up with something new and efficient, and you can become a contributor. So not just that, you can also ask about how the security is implemented, like where are the passwords stored, how is it stored as, can it be bypassed, how to prevent that. So all this is going to help you in developing the security mindset, which wouldn't be possible if you can't even see what's happening under the hood, right? So that leaves us with the question. I mean, it seems a little bit counterintuitive, right? Like something open being more secure. Like, is it actually so? I think Devang would be the right person to answer that. So over to him again.
Okay, sorry, Deva. I will take over this position. So thank you, Neeraj. So I hope you all got the idea of how open source changed the way people think. Actually, how it helped in bringing a security mindset. Actually, let me ask you, can you hear my voice?
Sure,
Yes,
Harsh.
Harshil, we can.
Okay, fine. Okay. So I'm saying that, but still there is a fear inside people that, okay, the source code is publicly available. So are they really secure and are they safe to use? Yeah, these are the questions in people's mind actually. So I would say yes, in a certain way. Okay. So, but we are not stressing that open source is always the better compared to closed source softwares. Actually, there are some trade-offs. Okay, let me come to that thing. And first thing I would say is that security is just a matter of time. Given proper time, both of them, even if it is open or closed source softwares, it can be compromised. But in the case of closed source softwares, that is proprietary ones, it takes some time compared to the open source since the code is not publicly available. But and the open source other key factor is that open source won't attract much attention of attackers because see the people's mentality. People always have this curiosity to know what is hidden from them. Okay, so yeah. And another point I would like to mention is that there'll be fast recovery action to fix a vulnerability in the case of open source. As the attackers try to find a way inside, at the same time, security researchers all over the world will be trying to eliminate that vulnerability. Such a wide-scale fixing won't be there in the case of closed source proprietary softwares. So this says that open source is secure in a way. Okay, and of course, everything that is open is not always at risk. A nice example for that is our popular hashing algorithms. Hashing algorithm you may know because for storing passwords and for cross-checking passwords, we use hashing algorithms. Yeah. So the algorithms are publicly available, but it doesn't make it vulnerable because of the difficulty in reversing it. Okay. So the next thing, why should we consider open source softwares with respect to the security point of view? Okay. So the first point is that number of exploits are always proportional to the popularity of the tool. But it doesn't mean that more number of vulnerability disclosures or security patches for a tool says it is less secure. Okay. And in the case of open source, there's a great diversity actually. So for example, in the case of Linux, if you take the case of Linux, yeah, some of you will be using Kali Linux, some of you will be using Ubuntu, Fedora, such and such. Yeah. So this makes it difficult for the attackers to build malware specifically for a particular tool to hit a larger public. And the third one and the most important one is that the many eyes theory, that many people are involved behind this, watching it. This ensures that the security of the open source components and applications, and with with open access to the source code, anybody can conduct code reviews and stop vulnerabilities from entering the code base. And the important one at the last thing is that in case of open source, we are getting almost the same features and security as of proprietary softwares with even lesser cost. Almost in majority of the cases, it is zero cost. Okay. And the fifth one I would like to mention is that open source compared to proprietary ones, it is also flexible and transparent. Okay. And so as a coin always has a two sides, there are some challenges too in this thing. So I would like to welcome Devang to sharing these challenges to you. So over to you, Devang.
Thank you, Ashik. As we know, nothing interested is ever completely one-sided. There are some vulnerabilities associated with open source security too. The top ones are publicity of exploits. Open source vulnerabilities are typically made publicly available on platforms that are accessible by anyone. On one hand, disclosing them as soon as it is discovered allows for the open source community to come out with a patch and fix it. On the other hand, it also opens doors to attackers to take advantage of this freshly discovered vulnerability. Heartbleed bug is one such example. This security hole was discovered in OpenSSL and was disclosed in 2014. At that time, when the software was being used by 500,000 trusted websites on the internet. This resulted in a full open way for attackers to enter and extract sensitive data remotely, causing users to lose authentication, credentials, and stealing secret keys. Although patch was released on the same day, it has still not been updated in about 90,000 servers worldwide. Next, licensing compliance risk. Open source software comes with a license that allows the source code to be used, modified, or shared under defined guidelines. A single application often includes several open source components. Organizations are required to comply with each individual open source licenses, which can be quite overwhelming. Non-compliance with licenses can put enterprises at the risk of legal action, impacting the operations and financial security. Third, cloning malicious repositories. Careless developers copying and pasting code from one open source repository to another can involve transferring the vulnerabilities to the project they are working on. In addition, once the flawed code is added to the codebase, there's no way to update it or track it. Therefore, the whole project is subject to the vulnerabilities introduced with the external code. For a normal user, cloning this infected repository can make his or her system vulnerable. Vulnerabilities in third-party libraries or dependencies. If an organization is planning to code a new software, rather than starting from scratch, they are far more likely to use current third-party open source libraries, which may be set up on another third-party library, and so on, to build their project. This requires companies to keep track of multiple vulnerabilities present in these dependencies and remain as diligent about patching them as they would be about patching their own code. Last, the legitimacy of contributors. The most important point is to understand that a huge number of open source projects are a group of people who are doing this for fun. They're not security experts. They're also not going to adopt some complex security processes. If they get a nice looking pull request, they'll probably merge it. We need to also question whether we can trust the number of contributions and how authentic they are. It's fairly possible for a group of 10 hackers to reproduce 1,000 contributions to a certain open source project they plan to exploit later. Having said all these points, the security of software, be it open source or proprietary, depends on the architecture setup, language and frameworks involved, and the team of developers. Open source provides us the ability to validate the code, thus has the potential to be more secure. Now Hashir will explain how the community can together overcome these challenges by using and contributing safely. Your turn, Hashir.
Okay. Before that, let me tell you one thing. See, guys, all the audience, you are free to ask questions in the chat box anytime you want. Okay. So due to the time constraints, we'll only be able to answer those at last for the maintain the continuity. Okay. I hope no problem. Okay. Then yeah. So the safe usage part. Yeah. This is where the question lies. Yeah. Seeing these challenges explained by Devang nicely. So the easier way to overcome this is to be aware of those things and to go in a safer way while using it. That is a safe usage. Yeah. And also use secure protocols like SSH wherever possible, like whenever you do the cloning from any repositories. So we should always look for the recent updates. Yeah, because sometimes the vulnerability has been patched, but you are still lying on the previous versions. That makes your system vulnerable. Okay, so always look for previous updates and update it properly. And another thing is that never trust anything blindly, even if it is open source or closed source. Always try to know what is going on behind it. Yeah. So let me tell you an interesting example. What could possibly happen if you don't use it safely? Okay. So there is this one guy. This is a curious guy. Yeah. So he got to know about keyloggers. So what is keylogger? That will be the question in your mind. So it is just a simple tool to capture whatever you type in your keyboard. So it can be used for stealing your passwords. Okay. So whatever you type in your keyboard can be taken. So he wanted to test this tool on his another computer. He Googled and found out a repository which is having this. Without even checking the quality of this repository properly, he cloned it, and he was not able to understand the code actually, but he executed it also. Okay, what happened is that instead of getting keys for him from his another computer, it was actually giving the hacker the keys from his computer. Okay, so you know the seriousness of this, right? Yeah. So before thinking of using anything, always ask yourself and ask the community too, and always be active in community discussions about the recent updates and recent vulnerabilities and everything, and select what community is preferring. Okay, ask before choosing any kind of softwares for any usage. Ask the community which they prefer. Yeah, and check also whenever you try to go to any repository, and check whether the codes are properly reviewed or not. And always prefer the tools and software which are having an active community back support. Actually, more number of contributors is not enough. They should also be active every time, fixing the vulnerabilities and faults in the code. Okay, and so moving on to the next section is the safe contribution. Safe contribution is actually a big factor. Everybody can contribute, but safe contribution actually matters in this case. There are two ways to ensure this. One is secure coding, and another is setting permission and proper reviewing. Okay, over to secure coding. Suppose if you build a program with C++ or C, but you don't know the memory management. Yeah, it can happen. And it can even pave for many vulnerabilities, way for many vulnerabilities like buffer overflows. Hope you might have heard it, or you can just Google search it. Okay, so this vulnerability, buffer overflow, this can even crash your whole system. So such risk also exist in web development side too. Some of them are like, you probably might have heard, SQL injections, cross-site scripting, etc. And there are much more which we can include here. Yeah. So how to avoid this is to practice secure coding. You must know what is happening deep inside, and you must also validate input data taken from users. You must also sanitize it before proceeding further. Yeah. So to help you find these common vulnerabilities, there are many code analyses, right? Which find these problems which can't normally be detected by these compilers. So some of these code analysis are CPP check, which is a tool to help you find the common vulnerabilities while you write the C++ code. Yeah. And the another thing is that find bugs, a tool developed by University of Maryland. So the next way is to set up proper permissions and reviews. You should always set up proper permission, like who can edit or apply changes. Not everyone can directly make changes. They can suggest, but you should only merge it or take it only if it is safe and good. Yeah. And by the way, let me tell you, there are some people who tries to be a part of the project even without contributing anything. Be aware of those guys, okay? Yeah. And give least privileges which is required in order to prevent the misuse of anything. Yeah. So privilege means, yeah, you might have heard like in the Ubuntu Linux system, you might have heard root user, the normal users like that. Yeah. So such kind of privileges exist everywhere. An active team should always be there monitoring the changes that is happening. Yeah. So this is an important part. The final changes and updates should only be given after proper discussions and reviewing of the code for any errors or faults in that. So most of the popular free and open source softwares like GNU Linux have such teams. Yeah. So coding or building project is only one way of contributing. There are many other ways also to start with. I think Devang is the suitable person to talk about this, as he has made such contributions like in Medium blogs and all. So over to you, Devang.
Harshit is absolutely right. Coding is just one of the ways. You'll be wondering how else you can contribute to the open source community, right? Okay, so first and foremost, improving upon the documentation. Have you ever gone through a set of instructions provided in the README file and you're like, okay, so step 1, I've done that. Step 2, easy. Step 3, hold on, I think there's some step missing. In addition to improving your documentation skills, you adding that step and contributing back will definitely help so many more people trying to run the project. Next, taking part in discussions and reviewing the code base will not only improve your understanding of the project, but also give you an opportunity to network with professionals, employers, and potential clients. I'm sure every one of you must be using Stack Overflow on a regular basis to get solutions to your coding problems. Have you ever thought why you are the one always seeking help? If you have a fair understanding of the language or the framework, I'm pretty sure you can answer some of the queries as well. So boys and girls, consider adding this task to your bucket list. Blogs. Blogs is another way of giving back to the community. I recently started writing blogs on Medium. Remember the keylogger kid Ashley told you about? No, don't worry, that's not me. But in case you find him, do refer him to my first blog. The second blog I wrote was on least significant bit image technography. It was a difficult topic and I was trying to implement the technique using Python. I went through a lot of articles and papers, watched some tutorial videos, but finally penning down my understanding made the concepts clear for me. I even got these blogs selected to be published in some of the leading educational publications like Analytics Vidya and The Startup to spread the knowledge as much and as far as possible. So do check out my blogs and clap to show me how much you like them. Coming back to the presentation. Making video tutorials and uploading them on YouTube and other similar platforms require a considerable amount of effort, but is an extremely efficient way of sharing your skills with the community. Then specifically for the InfoSec community, preparing write-ups to capture the flag contest is a way of contribution too. Finally, you may participate in community conferences and meetups held frequently in and around your place. Due to the pandemic, they are being held virtually. This gives you a really good opportunity to take part in some of the international ones and interact with people and make friends in the open source community. That's it from my side. Back to you, Harshit.
Okay, now you might be thinking how a normal small blog or a piece of writing can help in open source development. Okay, so let me tell you this. People who don't have exposure to this community might be reading these works. Suppose the writing is about the development of a small tool, like we saw in the case of Devang's LSB steganography tool. Yeah. So some percentage of the people who actually see this may actually be going to try it out. They may even come up with a better version of that. So they may contribute what they have developed, which is a better versions maybe. Hence we get more contributors, and more contributors means better programs, which further attracts more users, and increase in the number of users further results in active community and better analysis of the code. So we will get more contributions and more security patches to this code. So this further makes it better performance and security in our open source world. So which even in turn attract more number of people. Yeah. So it is like a cycle of progress. Okay. And also a lot of big companies like Microsoft are now adapting open source or using open source resources to build their product. Hence, this also increases job opportunities related with force. It also means that more secure and better performing softwares to the world. Finally, what we will be achieving is a better world of open source where everything is having better performance and security day by day. Okay, that's from our side. And as Uncle Sam says, we want you to join open source community. Okay, this is the time for questions. So if anybody is having any questions, we are open to those.